protective instincts and his jealousy flared up immediately. Personally, Johnny, that sounds like a plot from one of those spicy novels you read. I'm going with you as your bodyguard. Jack, you couldn't guard a sandwich from a pigeon. Chrissy giggled. I'll wear my black suit. I'll look official. Jack insisted. The delivery turned out to be a massive misunderstanding. Mr. Montgomery was indeed wealthy, but he was 85 years old and nearly deaf. He didn't want a personal encounter. He just wanted someone who knew how to plant orchids because his gardener had run off with the cook. Jack spent the entire afternoon in his formal black suit, sweating profusely in the California sun, while he helped Johnny dig holes in a greenhouse. This isn't very glamorous, Jack, Johnny teased, handing him a shovel. I'm an undercover gardener, Jack grumbled. Watching for botanical assassins. Chapter 15, The Anniversary Disaster. It was the Ropers' 20th anniversary, and Helen was feeling neglected. Stanley hasn't even mentioned it. She sighed to the trio. He's too busy trying to fix the leaky faucet with chewing gum. We'll help you, Mrs. Roper, Chrissy chirped. We'll throw a surprise party in our apartment. A surprise party? Here, Jack asked, envisioning his security deposit vanishing. It'll be romantic. Jack, you can cook a 5-course meal, Jeanne said. The plan was for the trio to lure Stanley upstairs while Helen waited in a candlelit room. But Stanley, sensing something was up, thought the kids were trying to hide a new pet. I know you got a goat in there. I heard the bleating, Stanley shouted, bursting through the door just as Jack was flambéing a steak. The bleating was actually Chrissy trying to hit a high note on a romantic record. In the confusion, the flam flamed a little too high, setting off the smoke alarm and drenching the entire romantic setup with the building's ancient sprinkler system. They ended up spending the Ropers' anniversary at the Regal Beagle, soaking wet but laughing. You know, Stanley, Helen said, squeezing his hand, this is the most exciting anniversary we've had in years. Yeah, Stanley grumbled, wringing out his disco headband. At least I didn't have to pay for the steak. Chapter 16, The Avant-Garde Archer. The doorbell rang at apartment 201 on a Tuesday afternoon, a time when the only visitors were usually bill collectors or Larry Dallas looking for a free meal. This time, it was Larry, but he wasn't alone. He was accompanied by a man with a wild mane of hair and a camera that looked like it belonged on a moon mission. Jack, baby, have I got a deal for you? Larry shouted, ushering the stranger inside. This is Lorenzo. He's the most revolutionary fashion photographer in the valley. He needs a specific look for his new campaign, The Urban Primitive. Jack looked at the man skeptically. And I have this look. Lorenzo circled Jack, making framed gestures with his fingers. The cheekbones of a warrior, the eyes of a lost puppy. It is perfection. I will pay you $100 for 2 hours of work. $100. To Jack, that was several months of beer and at least one semi-functional pair of jeans. He agreed. The urban primitive chute, however, was not what Jack expected. Lorenzo had him dress in a tunic made of burlap sacks and handed him a wooden bow. Now, Jack, leap over the sofa like a gazelle escaping a taxi. Lorenzo screamed, the shutter clicking frantically. Jeanne and Chrissy came home to find Jack midair, wearing a loincloth over his thermal underwear, attempting to look primitive while clutching a plastic fern. Is he finally joining the circus? Jeanne asked, setting her purse down. No, I'm a gazelle, Jack grunted, landing awkwardly on a cushion. Well, you look more like a hamster in a sack, Chrissy giggled. The shoot ended when Stanley Roper walked in to check a clunking sound in the radiator. He saw Jack posed as an archer on the kitchen table and Lorenzo screaming about primal energy. I knew it, Stanley muttered, backing out of the room. I'm raising the rent. This place is becoming a high-risk ward. Chapter 17, The Small Town Surprise. The peace of a Sunday morning was shattered when a young woman with pigtails and a suitcase stood in the doorway. Jack Tripper. It's me, Mary Lou from back home. Jack's jaw dropped. Mary Lou was his high school sweetheart, a girl whose idea of a wild night was sharing a root beer float. Mary Lou, what are you doing in Santa Monica? Jack asked, frantically trying to gesture for Jeanne and Chrissy to hide. My mama said you were living here with 2 assistants, Mary Lou said, her eyes narrowing as she spotted Jeanette's silk robe and Chrissy's fluffy slippers. Is this the missionary work you wrote home about? Jack had told his parents and, by extension, the entire town that he was in California to help wayward souls. Now, he had to maintain the charade while Mary Lou stayed on their sofa. Yes, Jeanne here is a reformed florist, Jack said, sweating. And Chrissy is a typist who lost her way. The next 48 hours were a marathon of lies. Jack had to hide his cooking school books. Mary Lou thought he was studying theology, and hide Larry Dallas. Whenever he came over, Larry's presence didn't exactly scream holy. The truth came out when Mary Lou found Jack's gay persona accidentally. She saw him doing a flamboyant routine to fool Mr. Roper into letting him stay. Oh, Jack, Mary Lou sighed, patting his cheek. I always knew you were too creative for our town. If you want to be a missionary who lives with 2 pretty girls and pretends to be something he isn't just to keep a roof over his head, well, that's just California, I guess. She left the next morning, leaving Jack with a jar of homemade jam and a very confused sense of relief. Chapter 18, Up and Down in 201. The building's elevator was a mechanical marvel from 1952. It moved with the speed of a tectonic plate and had a tendency to sigh when it reached the 3rd floor. One afternoon, Jack was helping Mr. Roper move an old cast-iron radiator up to the roof. They were squeezed into the tiny car, the radiator taking up most of the floor space. I don't like the sound of that cable, Stanley, Jack said as the elevator gave a particularly loud clunk. "It's just the building settling. Tinker Bell." "Stop being such a girl," Stanley grunted. Seconds later, the elevator jolted and came to a dead stop between floors. The lights flickered and went out. "Great," Jack sighed in the dark. Trapped with a radiator and a man who hasn't changed his socks since the Eisenhower administration. "I heard that," Stanley yelled. "They were stuck for 3 hours. In that time,